guys, welcome back to another video. I'm Sarah from Who I Am Among the Pages, and this is our second try filming this video. It keeps cutting out and I don't know why, but we are going to try to get through this. So today we're going to be discussing a book that I had talked about in being in the process of reading in my past couple videos. I'm sorry if I'm picking on my ears. I had to force my second piercings through and they hurt, and I wouldn't advise doing that. I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to do that. But anyway, we are talking about the tome known as Insomnia by Stephen King. And yes, this copy is raggedy now and I don't care. So before I get started, I want to preface this with saying if you are a huge Stephen King fan, I understand. Nothing wrong with that. Keep being a fan. If you loved this book, then by all means, love this book. I just didn't like it and had several issues with it, both as a reader and a writer. But again, if it's your favorite book, you're allowed to like it. This is just my opinion. And in addition to that, this is not necessarily a reflection of King as a whole, and I understand that he is very well loved, and I have read several of his other books and loved them. So this was really shocking that I didn't like it. I started this when I was in quarantine for our COVID, because I was sure that I was like, oh, well, I feel horrible. Why don't I read a book I know I'm going to love? Like, bring some light into things. So with that out of the way, I just want to say, don't kill me. Like, it's just my thoughts. So I'm going to start out with just a general synopsis of the story. I'll try to keep it spoiler free, but as always with book rants, if you don't want any chance of being spoiled on a book, because I am horrible about that, go ahead and click out. You're not hurting my feelings. I just don't want to ruin anybody's reading experience. Like, that sucks. I had the Harry Potter books ruined for me by this little jackass in my 4th grade class. And Anthony, if you're watching this, I'm still mad. Just saying. So yeah, we're going to get into just the basic synopsis. So this book actually starts out with a very interesting protagonist. You're following Ralph Roberts in the little town of Derry, Maine, who has recently lost his beloved wife, Carolyn. So after her passing, due to a prolonged battle with a brain tumor, he begins to find himself struggling with insomnia. He's never had this issue in his life and is really, really having a hard time. And through his sleepless nights, he's beginning to notice strange things happening around town, his little town, during the night, as well as things with the residents, even during the day, not looking quite the same. Several of his own friends begin to act much differently, and he has a feeling that somehow all of this is connected. So we're following Ralph Roberts, and later on, an old friend that becomes a much closer friend, through his adventure on figuring out what these things mean, how they're connected, and what his role is in playing this great orchestrated tragedy that's happening in this town. So I just want to start off by saying that this is a very interesting plot, and ideally it should have been great. I was very excited to read this book. So that's really all I can say without spoiling anything, because really a lot of it is spoilers. There's not much you can talk about this book. So if you want absolutely no chance of being spoiled, because I am going to get into spoilers now, click out. So you better be gone if you don't want spoilers, because I'm going to get into a deeper plot synopsis now. So basically, he has lost his wife, he starts experiencing insomnia, and the first thing he notices are these auras around, colored clouds around people, and these balloon strings sticking out of their heads. And he notices that they're different colors for different people. A couple nights later, he sees these little bald men come out of his neighbor's house. Nobody else seems to have seen them. So as time passes, he's losing more sleep. He's realizing his one neighbor who is actually a very good friend, and together they band together over their shared, I feel like I'm going insaneness, and discover that huge supernatural forces are at play in their little community. So again, a very interesting storyline, and I was completely on board. So I'm done with the synopses. If I'm going to get into just how I felt about it, first off, I hated it. I gave it 1 star on Goodreads. The last book I gave 1 star to, I believe, was Surfacing by Margaret Atwood, and that was a book I had to read for class and was just disgusted with it. Um, and I have to say, I was every bit as disgusted with this book. So the quick rundown of my problems with it. It is 900 pages, and usually I like huge books. I mean, the Outlander series is one of my favorite of all time, and I haven't gotten to the Fiery Cross yet, but it's like 1,065 pages. I really don't have an issue with long books, but this book did not need to be that long. Like, the story really could have been told at an average novel length in probably about 400 pages, if not less than that. It could have been told in half, if not a third of the amount of pages. And that kind of carries into my next issue, is that the book moves incredibly slowly. It just, we have huge gaps. I mean, I'm talking 100 pages where nothing really happens. You just have characters, and they're all older folks, going to this guy's house and talking. Well, there's a chess tournament down at the park. Oh, well, I saw something kind of funny last night, but now I'm just going to go to the grocery store like there's no issue. And, like, we have a lot of, again, 50 pages or so of Ralph, noticing these auras, and we get these passages of the book that are really him just describing what he's seeing. And, like, again, once you've already been over that, we know what we know what the character's seeing. We can apply that to the novel later on when those things are mentioned. We're not stupid. We don't need to be constantly told, oh, well, don't forget, it's like this haze around him and yada, yada, yada. So problem number 1 was pacing. Number 2 was the jump from classic horror, I guess, to just the straight up absurd. So in the very beginning of the book, I'd say like the first 200 pages actually, it was building towards what I thought was going to be a very traditional Stephen King horror story. Because at first we have Ralph, he's taking a walk, afternoon, it's like late August, it's very, very hot, he knows he shouldn't be out. He walks it by the airport just to kind of get away. His wife is still alive at this point, but she's in very, very bad shape. So he just needed a breather. So he's walking up by the airport, and he sees this neighbor of his who is very mild-mannered, he's a small man, he's very bookish, very erudite, and he'd never heard a foul word out of his mouth. He maybe didn't go to church all the time, but he was very laced up and professional, like constantly. So he sees his neighbor's car come flying up from the airport parking lot, like where the employees park, and of course he's not an employee there. So he sees the car come flying up. The guy gets to the gate and he starts screaming obscenities and just not acting like himself. So then he bursts through the gate and rams into another car. And then he gets out and starts, again, screaming obscenities at this guy. And he's like, dude, I don't, what is your issue? So then Ralph runs up and is trying to settle the argument. And Ed, the character, starts screaming at this guy who has barrels of fertilizer in the back of his truck. It was like, hey, Susan Day, how many kids have you killed today? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, this guy acts like he's flipped his lid. And then, they kind of calm down, and Ed's just not himself, but then he, like, flicks back to his old self. He's very much flip-flopping. So there's clearly something wrong with him. So I really thought that we were going to see, like, a descent into madness story, or just an overall, like, this guy's gone insane, and the things that Ralph was seeing at night, because it's mentioned that he's seeing things during his night walks. That's, like, his problem. I thought Ed was going to be doing something, and I was really excited for that. It was going to be like a Halloween story or something. But no. So when he leaves the scene that day, Ralph, it has a very creepy vibe to it. You can tell something's going to develop because of that. So I was totally on board until the auras started showing up. And I was like, okay, is Ralph descending into madness? Is he going to do something horrible? Because I was like, maybe this is going to be like a dissociative issue where he's going out and like killing people and not knowing that it's him, like a werewolf thing. But no, so he starts seeing these auras and the little balloon strings. And then one night he sees these, when he's sitting up because he can't sleep, he sees these little bald guys in doctor's coats walking out of a woman's house across the street. And then he calls 911 anonymously and reports them. And the woman's actually dead in her house of natural causes. And, you know, he reports people coming out of the house. So, of course, the police show up, but the door is locked from the inside. Like, there's no way. And then we get deeper into it, and then this, like, third little doctor bald thing shows up, and he's, like, hunting down this, like, friendly neighborhood stray that everybody takes care of. It's just one thing after another, and then we get these, you know, we finally, at, like, 500 and something pages, we get a scene between these, like, bald doctors and Ralph, where it turns out that, you know, they're like the agents of purpose, and then this other guy that Ralph had been seeing, the third one that was hunting the dog, is like the agent of chaos. And, you know, everybody's born, and there's like a certain amount of time that they're gonna have, like whether it's 87 years, you know, 3 months, 6 days, and 26 seconds, like something like that. But then there's people that are born into the chaos where there's no saying when they're gonna die. But then there's some people every now and then that are born in neither. They're just a shit shot. And apparently this Ed Deepnew character is one of those shit shots. But there's also, at the same time as all this really, I don't really feel comfortable speaking on this much, but this really heated community feud over an abortion rights activist coming to town to speak. And right before all this really started going to shit, Ed Deepnew had beat his wife very, very badly because she had signed a petition at the grocery store because she just wasn't thinking. She had her screaming daughter. So when something was shoved at her just to get out the door, she signed it. She didn't even really necessarily support it at the time. And so, yeah, he beat the crap out of his wife for signing it's called Woman Care, but it's basically Planned Parenthood in the real world. Yeah. And so Ed belongs to the, like, neither. And and I never even got why, but the Atropos, the chaos guy, has decided to use Ed because somebody up above him, and you never really get to know who that person is, doesn't want this abortionist to be there because there's going to be a woman there that brings her son, and the son has an important role to play in history years later. It's so confusing. And then there's like this whole thing, like they go up and down the planes of existence, so they can like disappear, and they go up the planes of existence, and time passes, and they're like gods, and then they can go back down to the mortal level. It's just stupid. And then at the very end, you know, things wrap up. Him and his woman friend, who had been his like compadre through all this, they get married. It's gonna be happily ever after. And then he's like, oh, I hear the death clock, which is what he had talked about when his first wife was dying, that he heard this like death watch everywhere. And like I could follow along with that. Like you know something's coming, so it's kind of like a countdown to it, a subconscious one. But then he says he hears it again, and then he like made a deal with like the agents of reason to somehow he found out that Ed Deepnew's little girl, who he was very close with, was gonna die. And I don't know how he found that out. It's never explained, or if it was explained, I didn't care. She's gonna die, and he makes an agreement to actually like help the agents of reason because they don't want Ed Deepnew to be used to stop the abortion rights activist. He makes a deal with them, like, well, if you'll let me give my life for this little girl, then I'll go help you. And like you don't know that until the very end. So the book ends with him just jumping out in front of a car and dying in the street. That's it. That's all. So that's the whole detailed shit show plot. So my first issue was the length. The second reason that I didn't like it was the just absurdity in the story. My third problem with it just lays in the fact that it is not very well edited, or revised. I guess I should say revised. So I think we can all understand just from writing papers for class, even if you've never written stories of any amount, we tend to, when we're writing through the first time, we'll say things over again. We'll have a paragraph where it's talking about this character description, and then go on and like describe it down below again, because it's just our flow of thought getting onto the paper. But that is why it's a first draft, and that is why you go over it numerous times to fix problems like that. And this book wasn't, and that's part of the reason why it was so long. And there was just whole subplots in the story that didn't need to be there. Like this whole abortion rights subplot didn't need to be there because it's not very eloquently spoken on, in my opinion. I think it's a very sensitive topic to pretty much everybody, regardless of where you stand on the subject. And at least in this day and age, to be reading it, it was not very elegantly addressed, because the people that were, I guess that's my next issue really, that's like number 4, is the cruelty with which Stephen King spoke on the subject. The people that were for it were portrayed, even by like the neutral Ralph Roberts, as like these crazy feminists, and just like they were insane. And then the people that were against it were insane because they were, they were against it, and they're all redneck and they're all dirty and this and that. But then the feminists were described as like, these 70s hippies, and not like in the, like looking back kind of way, like somebody that had lived through the 70s and didn't like the hippies. Just not a very nice way of looking at anybody. It's like the only person that had a moral high ground was Ralph Roberts, and he didn't have he didn't care. Like, it just wasn't something that he thought about a lot. It wasn't pertinent to him, because him and his first wife had never been able to have children. I don't like the way Stephen King spoke about that issue. And yeah, I don't know. It wasn't very well addressed. And it was published in 1994. And of course, I wasn't born until 2000. I can't tell you what the politics were like in 1994, really, other than beyond like a historical standpoint from history class. But I feel like, again, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, you need to be addressing it with a certain poise, and it wasn't addressed. And like, we really didn't get anything out of that discussion. Like, we didn't get a deeper understanding of why we should be for or against it. It was just, basically, if you had an opinion on it, you were bad for some reason or another. If you're a pro-abortion, you're this crazy feminist dimwit, basically, but then you were an idiot on the other side of it, and crazy and dirty and redneck and all this if you were against it. So where are you supposed to stand? And I don't know how much of that is a reflection of Stephen King. I really don't know much about his politics. And this is not a political channel. But I just, as a woman, it kind of disgusted me to see something that is so sensitive to most women, no matter what side you're on, to see disgust like that. And normally, like, it bothered me. It still sticks with me. It still disgusts me that this was a point of contention just to get the plot moving, because that's not something that should be used lightly, and I'll stand by that. That was like my main problem, is that honestly, this video is already 18 minutes long. I could stand here for longer and whine about it. But I guess, there were a few things that I did like about the story. And so there were 3 things that I can think of off the top of my head that I did enjoy. So the first one were the characters. The characters were very well fleshed out. Each of them had a very unique personality. You knew their viewpoints. You knew, even though the book was so long, and, I think we could have even gotten even more from the characters since it was so long. We knew Ralph, and like, even though Carolyn, his first wife, wasn't around, we really had an understanding of her through his memories, and how he compared his second wife to Carolyn. Whether that's healthy or not, we can discuss later. And they each contributed something to the story to create the whole character interaction web. Like, really, the story couldn't have existed in the same way that it does without one of the characters being involved. Like, all of them. There's a ton of them. But they each contributed such a distinct thing that without one of them, it really wouldn't have been a complete story. You would have had something missing, I feel like. Number 2, I never thought I'd be saying this, but actually the romance in a Stephen King book. I thought it was well done. Um, Never thought I'd say that. But in the book, of course, Ralph was married before his wife passed away. The way he talks about her is so charming and so sweet, and he obviously cared so much for her. He could admit her faults, he could admit his faults, but he loved her despite all of it. And then when he does get remarried to Lois Chase, I think her name is, his friend that turned out she was seeing all the auras too. Um, her husband had passed away a couple years ago, and she had grown close to Ralph and developed feelings for him before Carolyn had passed away. And she admitted that she'd had feelings for him, and he asked if Carolyn had known, and she's like, yeah, she did know, but she was such a great woman, she didn't hate me for it. And it was just so sweet, and it made sense, this trauma bonding. Normally I'm not a fan of that, but they had a relationship before this. He was very close friends with her. So it made sense that friends put through something like this, to me, would bond, especially when the one already had feelings, and then the other was just so lonely and so on his own. To have gone through something like that with a close friend that already had feelings for him, it was a very natural progression too. It wasn't all at once, oh, I love you so much. It was kind of building one step, one day at a time. And it did happen quickly. If you think about the fact it really only happened over 2 weeks. But to me, the progression was natural considering all the absurdity that was going on, which is kind of surprising to step back and realize like the romance is like the most realistic part of the book. But yeah. And the third thing that I noted, just as a writer, I think, is the prose was very pretty in the book. Really, you can open to almost any page, at least in my edition, and there's probably a line or two that are very beautiful, but also at the same time, a cat just walked by the window. That's not our cat. Oh, I'm sorry. Scared me. But the dialogue in the book is also very realistic. So since he's portraying the two sides, especially this abortion issue, as like these extreme personalities, the dialogue very much matched those extreme personalities. And dialogue is something I'm kind of a stickler for. It's something that I really focus on in my own writing. So to see it so well done in somebody else's book, and of course it's Stephen King, he's a legend. I really appreciated it. I was very impressed and I really enjoyed it. So with all the faults in the book, the writing was usually very pretty. And his descriptions of scenery are like spot on, and you have an image of what's going on, even when it is this absurd environment. So yeah, this video is already 22 minutes long, so I'm going to go ahead and try to wrap it up for you guys. So overall, I gave the book 1 star on Goodreads. I do not recommend this book at all because it is long, it is crazy, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and it's not very sensitive to issues that I really think should be addressed more sensitively. Again, because everybody on the spectrum has a very tight opinion on things, I think. But in other news, I'm just going to give you some news real quick. Today, between 12:30 and 4:30, I am getting my first little bit of BookTube related mail. You can see my face getting redder. I am so excited. I have never gotten a package related to BookTube at all, or, beyond like buying books and be like, oh, I'm going to haul these. So I am going to make another video today. I will look the same as I do now, just so you know. It will be filmed the same day. I'm not even going to try to lie about that. But I am so excited. I cannot believe it. I don't want to say too much, but it has something to do with another booktuber, a very well-known booktuber on here, and I've been watching her channel since I was 14, maybe 13, but probably 14, and I'm 20 now. So she really got me into the YA scene. It was her reviews that made me go out and buy Throne of Glass, which is really the reason that I got into YA fiction the way I am now. So I am so excited. I can't believe I'm so lucky. But yeah, I don't want to say too much. You guys will see a video of me opening the package. And I'll tell the full story behind it then. Other little bit of news, I don't think you can see, no you can't, but I went Black Friday shopping yesterday, and yes, I was very safe. I went later in the day, so there was less people. And I've already had COVID, and supposedly you have immunity for at least 3 months, and I'm still within that window. But even still, I play it very, very safe. I follow all the guidelines, stay away from people, so on and so forth. But I did go Black Friday shopping and got quite a stack of books that I can't wait to show you all. And we'll definitely be doing a haul video after, I can't tell you that part, but I will be doing a haul video soon. But yeah, other than that, there will be another book rant video coming out soon, because I had talked about reading Girl in Blue by Anne Rinaldi in my TBR for the month, and I am almost finished with that. And I really want to talk about it because it's a book that I read as a kid and loved, and I reread now and still love it. Nothing's changed. So yeah, that pretty much sums up this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're not new here, if you're subscribed, thanks for coming by. And if you're new and aren't subscribed, well, I hope you like the video. I hope you decide to stick around. But either way, I understand. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.